Hey everyone and welcome to Storytime. My name is Jake and today we are going to be looking at the subreddit r/maliciouscompliance, where people conform to the letter but not the spirit of a request. If you're new around here, please do hit subscribe down below so that you never miss out on another video. But for now, let's sit back, relax, and enjoy some malicious compliance. Angry Karen versus Too Tired for Your BS Front Desk Clerk. Here's how a Karen attempted to forbid me from getting coffee at my job, and how I sent her horribly bleached wig flying. Ah, the joys of customer service. Here's some background. So, I work at a club/fitness center that is located within a gated community. Basically, a breeding ground for Karens. Most people here are very entitled. I also happen to live in this community, but my mum and I rent and generally keep to ourselves and don't get involved in the drama. When you live in the community, a membership to the club where I work, that has a pool, tennis courts, gym, and dance studio, is included in HOA dues. When you rent, like my mum and I do, the owner's membership is transferred to you. I work the front desk/juice bar, which means I greet members, send emails, basically keep the place together. I also prepare all of the complimentary snacks and drinks, and keep them filled throughout the day. The people are very annoying, but it's good money for a 16-year-old, and my boss and co-workers are great. Now back to Karen. It's about 8 AM on a Saturday, which means prime coffee time. My shift starts at 5:30 AM, so I am pretty tired and ready for a cup. I make all the coffee and complimentary food and drinks, so after I finish setting up, I usually have some. I have explicit permission from my boss to do so. Members of the club can have all the complimentary food and drinks they want, so everyone wins. Enter Karen. The giant canvas tote and terribly bleached bob are telltale. I am standing at the counter, minding my own business, pouring a cup of coffee. Karen asks in such a shrill voice that it could probably break glass. "Young lady, what do you think you are doing?" Me, surprised, "Getting coffee?" Karen huffs. "You can't do that." Me, too tired for this BS. "Why not?" Karen, determined to combat the apparent danger of a minimum wage employee getting coffee, shrieks. "You aren't a member! You can't get coffee if you aren't a member! Until then, no coffee for you!" I start to hatch my ever so devious plan. Cue Uno reverse card. I don't respond to Karen and walk over to the clock-in machine to punch out. Members have a PIN number that they enter into a keypad so we can keep track of the number of people using the facilities. I walk over to the keypad, enter my PIN, and my name and a picture pops up on the monitor, indicating that I am indeed a member. I then walk over to the bar, passing Karen, who looks like she is about to spontaneously combust with anger, to pick up my half-full cup of coffee and proceed to fill it from the coffee dispenser. I then walk back over to the clock-in machine, holding my coffee, and punch back in. I sit back down at the front desk and start working on entering payments. Karen is still standing by my desk, looking like she is about to have an aneurysm. I just ignore her until she proceeds to leave. The 20 cents I lost from clocking out for 2 minutes was worth the look of pure horror on Karen's face. I'd say that 20 cents is worth it on putting a Karen in their place. Cellphone Company has a policy that you must call their customer care team to make changes on your account. About 5 years ago, my dad got sick and had to have brain surgery. Our cell phone bill has always been a family plan that my sister and I pay into monthly because it keeps costs way down for all of us. Also, we have been customers of this cell phone company we'll call Print since I can remember, like 16 years now, and we have always enjoyed their service in our area. When Dad got sick, I took over the bill because he was physically and mentally handicapped, and my mum didn't want to deal with the intricacies of the bill on top of everything else. Everything was fine for a few years. But about 2 years ago from the time of me writing this, we started having a metric ton of problems with print. I had traded in and upgraded my sister's phone during a promotion, which I was told in store would be half off, but we were getting charged full price. I went to upgrade my phone, which I had been told was eligible, only to wait an hour for the staff in store to tell me that it wasn't eligible until I changed something on the account. Basically, every time I tried to change phones or make any changes to the plan, something would go wrong, and I would have to change something on the account. The frustrating part about this is that every one of these incidents required me to call Print's customer care support phone line because the people in the Print owned and operated store could not make changes to my account. Just noting that this was an actual Print store, not a retail third-party location. This usually lasted 2 to 3 hours per incident because you had to explain what was happening to each person who helped you, and they never seemed to relay information if they passed you on to a specialist or manager. Often, I would spend hours on the phone until someone promised to fix the account. Sometimes this worked, but more often than not, they added a promotion which ran out a couple months after they fixed the account and everything went bad again. After about a year of these issues, one of the fixes stopped working and our bill jumped to about $60 per month. As if that wasn't enough, the way they billed everything was confusing and our account got double charged for the current month. I was so fed up, I finally decided to do something about it. It was already evening when I figured all of this out, so I printed out all of the bills from the past year, made notations about the inconsistencies, and cracked open a cold one to relax for the rest of the evening. I showed up to the local print store at 3 PM the next day, during one of their busier times. I waited in line to be helped, and asked for one of their supervisors. I made sure to be extremely polite, but firm that I wanted the double charge and inconsistencies on our account sorted out. The assistant manager, AM, explained once again that I must call the customer care phone number in order to take care of the issues I was having with my account. So, I did exactly that. I pulled out my previous bills with notes, my laptop with my print account pulled up, and finally my phone. And I dialed the customer care support line inside the print store. See, what I figured out after I think at this point 60 hours of speaking on the phone with print representatives in other countries was that as the owner of the account, I could assign anyone temporary privilege to speak to their customer care about my account. So, I explained to the agent on the phone that I was authorizing the assistant manager in the store access to my account for the day while we sorted out all the inconsistencies. I figured that if I had to waste my day off on the phone with their customer care team, then I might as well actually get things sorted out instead of ending up frustrated like always. The assistant manager was able to make notes on the account, and after the first few hours, realized what print had put me through. It ended up taking us over 5 hours to sort out the issue with the account, during which the assistant manager was tied up the entire time. I felt a little bad for the store and some of the customers who had to wait because the assistant manager was tied up and the store manager was trying to do everything. But we ended up getting about $600 refunded from mistakes and from being double charged for that month. I thanked the assistant manager for his time and told him that I hoped I wouldn't have any more issues with my account. He and the store manager apologized for all the inconvenience and likewise hoped I wouldn't have any more issues. It's quite ironic that, isn't it, how the phone companies are always the worst at dealing with customer support over the phone. The Old Man and the Locomotive. Background. So, some time ago, around 2012, one of my customers was a certain railway. This story was told to me by the old man that came in from that railway to run parts and place orders. He didn't like to use the phone, always in person. He even gave me the gate code so I could wander around unsupervised on the weekends, which I did, and it was amazing. Anyways, this man was long retired, mid-80s, but he hated being retired, so went back to work to do orders and parts. He brought a helper with him for anything heavy, and to yak for as long as you'd let him. He still worked for the railroad for fun. He loved it. It was his life. No kids, never married. I'd say the railway was his wife. Learned many fascinating things from him, but I'll share two here. The first thing is that they made everything for these trains. I mean it when I say everything. Foundry and lumber mill, from the castings for the locomotives, and its internal and external parts and wheels, to the woodworking for the seating, dining cars, plates, forks, knives, front to back, everything, all done in-house. They lived there. Housing and stores and everything, its own city. Because of this, no one but the yard personnel doing the work and the operators really knew much about how anything is made. This is highly relevant. The other is that they never threw any of that stuff away. Even as they developed newer and better models, it's all buried on site at those yards. It's a literal train graveyard and time capsule. Whole locomotives and cars were buried, all the things they used to build them too. Huge pits. Have seen. Not relevant, just interesting. This takes place in his youth, when he was fairly new to the railway and an apprentice back in the 1940s. He was apprenticed to a man who had been with this railway since the 1800s. He didn't say how old he was at the time, or he did and I don't remember, but here goes. He told me that back then he lived at the railway. The railway had housing for the workers, and him and his master were pretty much joined at the hip. He said it's like having your super experienced supervisor, who is also your neighbor, and your houses share common facilities, so you usually eat together too. His master is a few years from retirement at this point. One day, his master is approached by an internal group from the same railway, but from very far away. The company is throwing a large event, and for this event, they have restored a very old unit to show off. The problem is that after restoring the engine, while it's cooling down, it's seized. They have torn it apart twice, can find nothing wrong with it, put back together. Same thing both times, while cooling off, seizes. They are still running out of time, hence them tracking down his master. His master is the last employee they can find that still operated one of these things actively. The locomotive they restored was previously active many years before retirement. It should work fine. They want him to travel out of state, to their yard to help diagnose the thing. He says he already knows the problem. He tells them he can simply give them directions, but they solidly refuse. He must go in person. He asks for $500. Going on this trip is going to put him way behind, and it's a long trip. He wants compensation. They refuse to pay him anything close to it, and he refuses to go. They leave. A couple weeks later, they come back. They've rebuilt it a third time, and still it's seized. They are coming up on the date of the event, and they are in panic mode, having heavily advertised the appearance of this locomotive for the event. This time, he says $600, and nice accommodations for the trip, all paid, as in the company will foot the bills for nicer food and hotel, and all the time on the road is on the clock. They, the visiting group, agree without batting an eye this time. This is going to save them from major embarrassment. He makes them take the apprentice with for assistance, which they didn't even argue with. He told me they even had a driver to take them, packed, and they left the same day. Took their regular tool bags and nothing special. He said it was a 2-day ride up and they stopped at the nicest places they could for meals, stayed in nice hotels. Finally, they made it to the rail yard. Several very anxious people waiting for his input. The locomotive has not been touched since they last put it together. The first thing he does is to grab his caliper, walks down both the sides of the locomotive, taking measurements and making occasional markings.
Then he has them fire it up. It of course runs fine. He repeats his first steps, then he has them cool it down. Sure enough, as it's towards the end cooling down, cling! The sound of the engine seizing. The old man telling me this always yells this part, made me smile. Cue mass panic by local guys. It cannot be rebuilt again in time. Master, on the other hand, walks the same route along the engine, making a third round of measurements and markings. He then requests a sledge from the locals, grabs the sledge, and walks the engine again, this time giving a solid whack in certain marked areas. He repeats it a few times on each side. Try it now. It turns over freely. Do that, the hammer, on there, the markings, every time. He said the other group was a bit shocked, but thrilled, and then requested he write down what he did, like he offered in the first place. The trick here was, in all that all-in-house work they did, with the early units, every engine was unique. They had relatively poor control of the metals and casting in general. Differences in the molds and casting created different deformities in the cylinders. Bad metallurgical control back then made large differences in voids and inclusion in the metal, and as it was cooling, the differences in expansion would cause the pistons to catch. You had to know the engines, judge the differences in the casting by the colour of the metal, and know where it lay cold and hot. Then, once you figured out where it was stuck, you had to break it loose, banging on it from the outside at that area. Each engine its own creature. Later in production, the technologies and techniques matured, as did the metallurgy, and it became a non-issue and everyone forgot. So he got his only ever paid vacation, and his master got a nice fat bonus for an hour and a half of work, all because they wouldn't accept him writing down to measure it a few times, then beat on it in the odd spots, which was the gist of written instructions he left behind afterwards. No, they said he had to do it himself, and he did all the way to the bank. I'm always amazed how they fix stuff with little technology they had. Like nowadays it probably wouldn't do that, but back then they had to tap it in a certain space. It's so amazing.
Hey everyone, I hope you all had a really good day and that you enjoyed that video. If you want to check out some other videos, then click on screen right now, or check out the playlist down below. If you enjoyed that video, then please do leave a like. And if you want to submit your own stories, then you can do so by joining the Discord in the top link in the description. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you very soon.